Harford County is very fortunate that over the years, many researchers and historians have documented the area's history, and their efforts are still available for current authors to examine. This video highlights many of these publications that hopefully will entice future generations to dig deeper and preserve more of Harford County's rich heritage. We begin with an inscription left behind by Native Americans.
The Susquehannock Indians in the northern part of Harford County carved images on rocks that protruded out of the Susquehanna River, which today provide visual clues as to their lifestyle. Called petroglyphs, one such etching clearly represents a fish that was an important part of their diet, particularly spring migrating herring. Intrepid explorer, writer, and mapmaker Captain John Smith, in his General Histories of Virginia, described the Chesapeake Bay area of Harford County in 1608. He noted an abundance of fish and lauded the area's beauty, writing, "Heaven and earth never agreed better to frame a place for man's habitation." For 4 years, between 1658 and 1662, George Alsop was an indentured servant to Thomas Stockett in the area of present-day Haverdagrace. After returning to England in 1666, he published A Character of the Province of Maryland that included, among other observations, the presence of all sorts of fowls such as woodcock, pheasant, and especially turkeys that existed in the hundreds. In 1796, Englishman Thomas Twining was traveling through America and arrived in Haverdagrace, then a village of about 50 houses and 240 people. The visitor stayed at a tavern he described as the best inn I have yet seen in America, neat, clean, and pleasantly situated. It is believed the facility was operated by Mrs. Elizabeth Rogers on North Washington Street, where the two-story structure still stands today. In 1813, British Marines under the command of Admiral Cockburn attacked, pillaged, and burned most of Haverdagrace. Local Reverend James Jones Wilmer would later write a narrative respecting the conduct of the British, describing this barbaric occurrence and the heroic defense of the town by John O'Neill, who was captured and detained on a British ship. Wilmer also chronicled how O'Neill's daughter Matilda secured his release. Today, there are a number of vineyards in Harford County offering opportunities to taste and to buy local varieties of wine. The county's pioneer, however, was John Adlam, who by 1798 owned 360 acres of land now known as Swan Harbor Farm, where he cultivated indigenous fox grapes and made red wine. After sending 2 bottles to Thomas Jefferson, the master of Monticello acquired fox vine clippings from Adlam. Charles P. Dare's travel guide of 1856 pictured Harford County Railroad activities at Magnolia, Perrymansville, Aberdeen, and Haverdagrace, along with other interesting historical facts along the way. Of particular note was the use of a steam ferry at Haverdagrace to transport railroad cars across the Susquehanna River to Perryville. This was done until 1866, when the first railroad bridge was opened. George Washington Archer served as an assistant surgeon in the Confederate Army, where an accident led to his loss of hearing and his medical practice. He turned to historical research, leaving behind a treasure trove of Harford County documents before he died in 1907. Beginning about 1997, these were transcribed by Dr. David Hodge and can be found in the Historical Society of Harford County. Hannah Carter Hollingsworth was the wife of Joel Hollingsworth, who established a spoke and wheel manufacturing facility along Winter's Run in an area that was generally known as Wilna. From 1876 to 1882, Hannah kept a diary that was later transcribed by Carolyn Greenfield Adams that provides a plethora of her family activities and of the surrounding area. Beginning in late 1879, W. Stump Forwood of Darlington began publishing in the Aegis and Intelligencer a series of articles entitled The Homes on Deer Creek. From its mouth at Rock Run to a point 8 to 10 miles upstream, Forwood described the streamside structures for the benefit of those who come after us, before records are obliterated by time's effacing fingers. Today, thrill seekers are attracted to the king and queen seats of the rocks of Deer Creek to climb the rugged terrain, while others drive to the top and walk a short rocky path to enjoy the elevated view. Part of the site's allure derives from the 1880 legend by author Thomas Turner Wysong that this was the location where two Native Americans, Bird That Flies High and Fern Shaken by the Wind, were married. Once an important village, the most recognizable remaining site is the abandoned lock of the Tidewater Canal. In 1727, it was the location of the Upper Susquehanna Ferry and had a hotel, a store, a school, and nearby quarry where granite was mined. During the spring season, netted and salted herring was sent to distant markets, while in winter ice was harvested and stored in large warehouses at Lapidum. Born in 1816, Henry Richardson, years later in 1889, wrote about his early recollections of Bel Air. He recounted a story about a fellow who distributed the weekly Bond of Union newspaper to subscribers, but was acutely afraid of lightning. During one delivery, a thunderclap sent him bolting into a stranger's house, where he sought shelter in a feather bed, believing it somehow provided safety and protection. With the assistance of other writers, in 1901, Walter Wilkes Preston published the first comprehensive history of Harford County, starting with the exploration of Captain John Smith in 1608 up to the close of the War of 1812. It is worth noting that the aforementioned Dr. George W. Archer had years previously compiled drafts of more than 55 chapters for a county history, but Preston's publication curtailed his work. Writing for the Maryland Historical Magazine in 1918, William B. Marie published Early Settlers of the Site of Havertide. He meticulously traced its origin from land initially being claimed by Indian trader Godfrey Harmer in 1658 to finally being laid out by Robert Young Stokes as Havertide in 1782. In 1926, a committee of women self-styled as Ladies of the Library and chaired by Mrs. Frederick W. Steiner compiled a small pamphlet entitled Historic Havertide. This early history was drawn from the writings of Captain John Smith, the map of Robert Young Stokes, who first platted the town, and official notes of the commissioners of Havertide. An early description of place names of Baltimore and Harford counties was published by William B. Marie in the Maryland Historical Magazine in 1930. Included were names such as Amos Island, that had also been known as Honey Island, and Bynum Run, which was named for an early settler James Bynum, who met a tragic end having been murdered by Indians. An old pedestrian bridge once crossed the stream before reaching the hamlet of Bush, where Bynum Run water supplied the power for a grist mill. Historian Samuel Mason of Little Pines Farm in Darlington was both a photographer and author who had a keen interest in the county's industrial past. He visited historic sites, interviewed old-time residents, snapped images, and compiled his first edition of Historical Sketches in Harford County in 1940. After continuing to assimilate additional information in 1955, he expanded his book into a second edition. This 1943 book of 368 pages by Charles T. Duval covers the entire state of Maryland with 250 photographs, of which 21 are images of Harford County. If a researcher needs a pre-1943 photo of, say, the Rumsey Mansion at Joppa, the Old Tavern at Bush, Jerusalem Mills along Little Gunpowder Falls, or the Little Falls Meeting House, this publication is a good resource to examine. In 1947, Elias W. Kidwilder published Havergrace, the Town We Live In. In a writing style later made famous by novelist James A. Michener, he waxed eloquently about the arrival of Captain John Smith, writing, "Under the canopy of a glorious October sunset, in the year 1608, a Susquehanna chieftain and 60 of his warriors watched from a hill on an island in the mouth of the Susquehanna as a small, open boat beached about a mile down the river, and 10 men went ashore." Published in 1953, this 432-page Harford County Directory is properly styled as a reference book of history, business, and general information. Among the many topics, the still operating Harford Mutual Insurance Company in Bel Air is described, along with the long-gone Miller's Appliance Company that was next door to a Bendix laundromat. Early county history is chronicled by a group of researchers, and historian Lillian Brown wrote about Jarrettsville as well as county churches. An image of the 1920 Edgewood Arsenal is also pictured. In 1958, William B. Marie published an addendum to his 1930s Place Names of Baltimore and Harford Counties. Living on the neck of the Big and Little Gunpowder Rivers, he lamented the silting that had vanquished Joppa's shipping port. Marie also dismissed the notion that the river's name was the result of Native Americans, believing that gunpowder was seeds for a tobacco crop. He also investigated the biblical name of Jerusalem. The Chimney Corner Club was organized in 1921 and met in Fallston at Oakland, the Curtis home. In 1935, the organization's history, its tradition, along with considerable gossip, was reported to club members by Marion Curtis. In 1964, this document became the bulk of the text for a pamphlet entitled An Old Refrain, Fallston. Of significant interest is the inclusion of an old map of the village. C. Milton Wright, in his introduction to Our Harford Heritage, notes this book is intended to complete and update the earlier history written by Walter W. Preston. Indeed, it is a 460-page account of Harford's rich history, containing sketches by Selma G. Wright, maps by Louis Albanic, and many photographs taken by Dr. David C. Hodge. It remains today as the best single volume of our county's significant heritage. In preparation for America's 200th anniversary celebration, J. Edmund Bull, founder of the Stepping Stone Museum, undertook compiling Revolutionary Harford that was published in 3 parts. Part 1 focused on the colonists' food supply, clothing, housing, and health. Part 2 recounted events leading up to the Revolutionary War, and Part 3 chronicled events during the conflict. Bull left behind a full measure of Harford's history, which has inspired others to continue his quest. With a foreword by C. Milton Wright, In 1973, Charles L. Robbins and Selma G. Wright published a book titled Harford Images, featuring black and white photographs of the 4 seasons: summer, autumn, winter, and spring. The pages are unnumbered and the images are without identification. However, an index lists the approximately 100 locations in the order they appear. Celebrating the 100th anniversary of the county's seat in 1974, the Bel Air Centennial Committee, under the chairmanship of Barclay Earl Tucker, published a commemorative book. The document included some of the early history of Bel Air, the formation of the Volunteer Fire Company, information about various businesses, and a recounting of the town's churches. A publication inspired by America's 200th anniversary of independence was sponsored by the Lions Club, entitled Jarrettsville, Past and Present. A 3-woman committee, chaired by Mrs. Florence Kegley, researched and wrote about the history of the Jarrett family and development of the Jarrettsville area. This included churches such as Watts Chapel, early businesses like the village blacksmith, and industries such as the Chrome Valley Mill. A short history of the historic Hayes House in Bel Air, described as a gracious lady, was prepared by Mary C. Wright and published by the Historical Society of Harford County in 1978. Previously, in 1960, the dwelling and the adjacent property of the Kenmore Inn had been sold to Safeway stores, whereupon the house was moved to its current location on Kenmore Avenue and restored. The first, most significant early compilation of mills in Harford County was published in 1980 by the late historian John W. McGrain. He used the word mullinography to title his exhaustive research that chronicled hundreds of mills on dozens of streams throughout the county. This 104-page document contains a plethora of information. This 1981 publication, Bel Air, The Town Through Its Buildings, by Marilyn M. LaRue, represents the first significant inventory of the county seat ever assembled. The author attests she is a lover of old houses and history, but also acknowledges this inventory was a great deal of work, and since the project was sponsored by the town of Bel Air and the Maryland Historical Trust, there was also administrative paperwork. In 1985, genealogist Henry C. Peden Jr. compiled a book of more than 3,600 Harford County men who rendered active service in the cause of American independence between 1775 and 1783. An introduction written by William O. Carr noted, "Anyone who uses this work for any purpose will be impressed by the magnitude of the project that Mr. Peden undertook and the outstanding quality of the final product." In 1986, Peter A. Jay, along with contributions from several others, primarily Ellsworth Shank and David Craig, pulled together a 194-page book titled Haverdagrace, An Informal History. Jay was well equipped for this task, having a distinguished newspaper background with the Washington Post, the Aegis, and the Haverdagrace Record. Jerusalem Mill was constructed in 1772 by Pennsylvania millwright Isaiah Linton for David Lee, and Linton went on to construct more grist mills along Little Gunpowder Falls. In 1988, Terry L. Linton researched this talented builder, and his manuscript was published by Baltimore County Historical Society in their bulletin called History Trails. The year of 1988 was the 250th anniversary of the establishment of the Little Falls Meeting House at Fallston. This birthday prompted the Historical Society of Harford County to form a committee which prepared a comprehensive history of this Quaker milestone. The planning committee consisted of 6 individuals, from which Hunter C. Sutherland was selected to be recognized as its author. Wilna Wheels, A History of the Hollingsworth Family in Wilna, Maryland, was compiled by Carolyn Greenfield Adams about 1989. Its title, Wilna Wheels, derives from a spoke and wheel factory along Winter's Run, established by Joel Hollingsworth in 1862. The Adams booklet is dedicated to Mrs. Amy Spear, who began her Wilna research in 1960, beginning with the 1,000-acre Claggett's Forest, established in 1688. With a dust cover watercolor of the courthouse by George L. Van Bibber, the aforementioned Marilyn M. LaRue also published Bel Air, an architectural and cultural history in 1996. Part 1 of this 298-page hardbound book covered the early history of the town through World War II, and Part 2 followed with architectural styles, identifying existing and lost structures in the town. Beginning in 1972, historical architect James Thomas Wolin Jr. published in the Harford Historical Bulletin a comprehensive description of at least 18 significant early structures in the county. This effort was greatly expanded in 1996 with the 385-page An Architectural History of Harford County, compiled by Christopher Weeks. During the book preparation, Weeks was employed by the county's Department of Planning. For almost 9 years, Harford County freelance artist William F. Turner prepared a sketch almost on a weekly basis for the Baltimore Sun, totaling more than 371 drawings. In 1997, with assistance from his wife Patricia, who provided written descriptions, he published Picturesque Harford County. Subjects covered include public structures, schools, and churches. Berkeley is a crossroad community in northeast Harford County where, in October 1998, a group came together at the Hosanna School Museum to discuss how life in the small community might be preserved. The result was a tapestry of black and white lives woven together over 200 years, compiled in a 2003 book titled A Journey Through Berkeley, Maryland, authored by Constance R. Beams and Christine P. Tolbert. This 2003 hardbound 420-page book focuses on the village of Delta, Pennsylvania, in the Peach Bottom Township, best known for its quality slate production. It also addresses the adjacent Harford County village of Cardiff, where the mineral serpentine was mined, that was generally called green marble, as well as Whiteford, the former location of a packing company well known for its frozen vegetables. In 2004, Bill Bates authored a postcard book titled Bel Air, Images of America, that was sponsored by Arcadia Publishing. This was followed by 2 more similar efforts, notably Harford County in Vintage Postcards and Harford County Then and Now, both copyrighted in 2005. 1 year later, he issued Heaven to Grace as part of Arcadia's Images of America series. For those researchers looking for black and white local images with captions, all 4 of these works are valuable resources. Also in 2005, David Craig and Mary L. Martin published Greetings from Heaven to Grace, an 8½ by 11-inch book of 128 pages with color images of the waterfront city. This exhaustive effort featured postcards from a number of sources, along with informative captions. It is a valuable resource for Heaven to Grace images. As indicated by his comprehensive title, Abstracts of Marriages and Deaths in Harford County, Maryland Newspapers, 1837 to 1871, this exhaustive 2005 effort by Henry C. Peden Jr. provided researchers and genealogists with a valuable document. In 2006, Peden published the Harford County Stud Book, reflecting the county's contributions to horse racing in the 19th century. 3 more books followed, one in 2010 titled Colonial Tavern Keepers of Maryland and Delaware. Then in 2016, Families, Cemeteries, and Grave Sites in Harford County, Maryland. And lastly, Harford County, Maryland Equity Cases, 1803 to 1860, that debuted in 2019. In January 2005, Jack L. Shagna Jr. published his first book about Harford County titled Bel Air Roller Mills, the town's first industry, that chronicled the story of Henry Record. This was followed in the same year by Jerusalem, a preserved mill village, which was a historical and technical review of the village's development and growth. Another county mill book debuted in 2007 titled Eden Mill, an illustrated history, to be followed in the same year by Rock Run Mill in the Land of Promise. The year of 2007 brought the book Harford Glen, an outdoor classroom and preserve, and the subsequent year, Dave Duran, The Nature of His Art. Beginning in 2005, Henry C. Peden Jr. and Jack L. Shagna Jr. published in the Harford Historical Bulletin a survey of tinsmithing in 19th century Harford County. This was followed by a major book in 2007 titled Under the Spreading Chestnut Tree, Blacksmithing in America, which identified almost 1,000 Harford County blacksmiths. During the following year of 2008, 2 books were produced: Spring Houses, Cool Countryside Rustic Relics, and The Lofty Barn, A Farmer's Castle. In 2009, 2 more books were published, being Churches, An Illustrated History, and Mills, Grist, Saw, Bone, Flint, Fulling, and more. The authors began researching a book on county bridges, but quickly realized this effort would have to be broken into 3 parts. In 2010, books featuring timber bridges, covered and uncovered, bridges, wrought iron to steel to reinforced concrete, and railroad bridges were published. The Bon Pa Remembered, A History of the Maryland and Pennsylvania Railroad, debuted in 2011, followed by Duck Hunters on the Susquehanna Flats, 1850 to 1930, and Harford County Place Names, Past and Present, in 2014. The next year of 2015 brought Country Stores, Harford County's rural heritage, and Heavy Industries of Yesteryear. In 2016, Carriages Back in the Day appeared, with the Concord Point Light Station in Havre de Grace being published in 2017. Their last Harford County book, Havre de Grace, Its Historic Past, Its Charming Present, and Its Promising Future, came out in 2018. During this intervening period in 2006, Terry A. Noy published The History of the Harford County Sheriff's Office. He derived much information from newspaper accounts and also provided a listing of county sheriffs with photos and their dates of service. In 2007, the municipality of Bel Air published a 62-page color pamphlet titled Bel Air, A Guide to Our Historic Town. It included a brief history, the neighborhoods, and businesses, along with a back cover pocket that contained a folded map of the town. Artist Alice Humphreys contributed numerous watercolor illustrations such as the courthouse, Office Street, Rockfield Manor, and the Chamber of Commerce building. Doug Washburn, with assistance from several researchers, compiled and wrote A History of Pilesville in 2014. It covered the grain grinding mill and railroad station at the village, as well as sites in the immediate area. Washburn published a second 238-page book in 2020 titled On the Road from Jarrettsville that documented the village and its surrounding areas. The most recent and a very significant book debuted in 2021 titled Biographical Dictionary of Harford County, Maryland, 1774 to 1974. It was authored by Henry C. Peden Jr. and Judge William O. Carr Jr. and documents more than 1,200 prominent county individuals.
The 250th anniversary of the founding of Harford County will be celebrated in 2023. It is our hope that viewers will be motivated to examine some of the foregoing documents and write their own story, or perhaps dig out old family letters, or photographs, or postcards, or perhaps a diary, and share them with fellow residents. Our county is rich in history, and everyone shares some responsibility to do what they can to preserve our heritage.